I could just speak more recently with some of the political challenges, or I'll say community challenge we've experienced, especially with our Hispanic families. As I said before, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools serves several families who speak many languages, many who face immigration concerns. We need to shift into how we were showing up. As I mentioned earlier, as we began our conversation, we partner with a couple of local organizations that our families trust, and I'm talking about our ML community, that they quite often frequent. These are organizations that they truly trust, and I can think of two of them. And what we did was work closely with those organizations in the community who spoke the language, who had staff who could connect with our families, who were from the same backgrounds as our families.
Hi guys, welcome everyone to another episode of Leaders of Tomorrow, a podcast series by TomoClub, and I am one of the co-founders called Avinash Bansal. And today on our podcast, we have a very special guest. For the first time, we are podcasting with the Director of Family and Community Engagement from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, Latisha Hensley. And it's an amazing pleasure to have you here, Leticia.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here to engage in conversation.
Absolutely. I think we want to add a new perspective to our guest, to our audience. And today's topic is why families aren't coming back and what schools are getting wrong about it. I think though it feels weird to say that it's almost been more than 6 years when the COVID thing came, but the aftermath is still happening and we're still dealing with it. But it's not only about that, it's multiple other factors which are just piling up and educators can't catch a breath. So that's the reality. But before we get into it, I would love to know, if you can share a little bit brief about yourself for our audience.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you, Latisha Hensley. I am the Director for Family Engagement here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. We are located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have over 140,000 students that we serve. We have 185 schools currently in which we support with family engagement efforts. Our school district is an urban school district in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we have a very diverse population. We're serving over 200 different cultural backgrounds and over 150 different languages and dialects are represented in our district. So really our work is really entrenched in ensuring that we can work with our schools and creating those welcoming environments. We can work with our families to ensure they are aware and are able to access the resources that are available to them to support the whole child and basically support the whole family.
That's incredible. It felt like you were almost explaining a demographic of a country, because it's insane, like 200 different cultures all together at a one district. That's the beauty of United States, right? And that is what United States is all about. But I was doing my own research, and in fact, you also were sharing somewhere that only 23% of the parents have expressed interest in recovery programs, like summer school, and families haven't fully come back. From where you sit running family engagement, for one of the largest districts in the country, why do you think families haven't come back, or what is the school role in that?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part. I think post-pandemic, some of the reasons why families haven't come back is a combination of various barriers towards, in-person attendance. When we think about the pandemic, remember we shifted to a lot of those digital platforms, those virtual opportunities. And so, many other families many may not see it necessarily, important to necessarily be there in person. But there are a lot of other things that we can consider when we're thinking about families not coming back. There often are communication gaps with the schools, not clearly communicating how their child is progressing. There are opportunities where families feel unwelcome. So what is that relationship with the school? Some of our families, you have to think, may not have had the best experience when they were growing up in school. So there's some history there where they may not feel comfortable or they may feel intimidated coming into school. So how do we create that environment where we're saying, hey, you are welcome here and we want to partner with you? I know oftentimes when we're thinking about here in my district, we have to be very careful with that information overload for families. They, feel overwhelmed by the volume of communication. So while sometimes in some districts there may be communication gaps where they're not receiving clear communication, and other times it may just be an overload. They may not know exactly how to sift through that information and what it means from them. Language, as I mentioned, in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we have a very diverse population. So language barriers may prevent families, from coming back, as well as technology hurdles. Since post-pandemic, we're still, learning these new platforms. We have AI that's on the rise and how to navigate that. And so that may be a hindrance for our families, especially our ML families who may struggle with the language barrier, and as well as families who may have some challenges with the digital literacy piece. And we can't forget there may be working challenges. Schedules may hinder families from coming back to the schools. We have to be considerate of our families' working schedules. So if we're offering opportunities or engagement events during the school day, well, many of our families may be working an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5, so they may be unable to attend. So we really need to consider all of those factors and really know who our families are and who we are serving so that we can best meet their needs.
No, wow. That definitely is a lot of diverse directions of why this is happening. But what about the lack of confidence in the school ecosystem? We see have you guys seen any decline in enrollments lately?
Yeah, and I think that's across the board nationally, declining enrollments when we're thinking about, if we're speaking of public education, just rebuilding trust. I mean, really, that's our role now in our district, is just really rebuilding trust with our families and with our community, and just showing that we're here to partner with you. We want your feedback. We are a source of truthful information, and, just really showing them that we're care for your student. Everything is student centered, and we want what's best for your student. And that's pretty much what we need to do here and what we are doing here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools.
No, I agree with you. In fact, homeschooling is on a rise. Charter schools movement is definitely growing. And now this, I don't know whether about your state, but the ESAs, the education saving accounts, direct to parent. Is that happening in your state as well?
That is happening in our schools. Like everywhere we turn around, I think especially charter schools, they are, popping up everywhere. And so that's our role, to get into the community. And I think that's one thing that we are doing differently here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. We're not necessarily waiting on the community to come to us. We're going out into the community. Our building leaders, our district leaders, our school staff, our goal is to meet our families where they are. And so we are going into the community and we're sharing some of the great things that are happening in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. And we're really just giving letting families know how their child can benefit from coming to our schools. We have various programs that are available for schools to meet and cater to the interests of our students and families. And so that is our goal, is to really just show how we stand out amongst all the others.
So that makes less sense. And building on your point, so I was reading somewhere that there's a difference between family engagement and family involvement. And, it's what I understood was involvement is when, they're leading with its mouth, and engagement is when they're leading with their ears. So tell us more about it, and what do you think you guys are in terms of engagement versus involvement?
So in CMS, CMS is short for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. We are very intentional about drawing that distinction between family involvement versus family engagement. While family involvement, we don't want to say that's necessarily a bad thing or we got to lean away from it, because sometimes that's pretty much all families can give at a certain point. We tend to want to move towards engagement. So when you think about family involvement, it's school-centered. That means we, the school, we're designing the event, we're setting the agenda, we are talking to families, we are doing to families. So when you think about like the newsletters, you think about the open houses, those things are necessary and they need to continue, but it's just a one-way communication there. We're telling families what we need from them, what we want them to do, what supplies your students will need, and that's pretty much it. We are doing the talking. Family engagement, however, is more family-centered. It's when we're asking the questions, we're listening, as you mentioned, with our ears, and we're adapting based upon what we hear from our families. Is we're asking our families, what is it that your child needs? How can we work together? In family involvement is this is what we need from you. So you can see that family engagement is more of a relationship based two-way communication opportunity. And so that is really the difference between involvement and engagement.
No, I agree with you. In fact, there's a growing trend of having lesser kids. So people, and also having people involved in the parenting way much more than they were like a decade back.
Mm-hmm.
Because of multiple reasons, right? Lesser babies, or more money, or more information access, or AI availability to everyone, or Instagram, which is always making us
Mm-hmm.
feel less of a parent than we are. So as a parent, it's tough, and that's why they are, ranting to the schools more what they used to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and
Mm-hmm.
plus, if I have a son of 2 year old, so for me also, the biggest, when I was thinking the decision making metrics of a school, infrastructure always used to be the top one, right? But now it's somewhere as a hygiene that, even if I can trade off on the infrastructure, I'm much more interested to know and talk to the teachers. What do they
Mm-hmm.
think? How do they think about kids? And for me, the teachers have taken the first priority. Earlier I used to be like, it's okay, teachers are all good, and now I want to know about them more. And then of course the curriculum. So I think parents have a lot more opinions than ever, and they want the teachers to listen to them. So yeah, can't blame it, because I've been on the both sides of the table, and I can empathize, but at the same time I understand both sides too.
Yeah, and we have to continue to work for that. We want to make sure our staff, our teachers, they know their families and know what motivates students. I think parents, we are our first child's teacher, and our staff, our teachers can learn a lot from our families. So that can help with that classroom behavior, how that child learns best, how to navigate certain situations, and just staying in contact with teachers as much as possible, just to see how families and the staff can work together to ensure the success for that student. I always think that is important.
Also, tell me, I heard about this, that the school funding formula, has a major part of attendance. So if the attendance goes down, the amount of fund that schools should get also reduces. Is it true?
Well, when you think about enrollment in many states, that does determine funding for public schools. I can't really speak to
Not
exactly
enrollment.
how that formula is, created, but yes, attendance is or enrollment is a key factor in the funding for the school. If you don't have the enrollment, then school districts tend to lose positions because you don't necessarily need the staff. You don't need all the staff in the building if you don't have the students, there. So there's no one to teach if you don't have as many students. You know what I mean? So that does impact funding.
Because I think if a kid misses more than 10% of the school year, they are called chronically absent, right?
Yeah, you begin to get into that chronic absenteeism. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because again, when I was reading and more about family engagement, the first thing came to my mind is, more the family is engaged, lesser the chance of chronic absenteeism. And that's directly impacting everything, like, from the academic scores that the kid will have, or the funding the school will have, and the funding will depend on the teacher hiring capacity. So it all feels very connected, and for me, the starting point of this long chain was enrollments and attendance. So that's the first thought came to my mind, that this has to be the top one priority for every school, right? So why do you think it's
Absolutely.
why don't you think that? Because I don't hear them talk about it a lot more than they should, even in conferences or in general. So why do you think there is? Am I getting it wrong, or there is lack of awareness about this problem being the most important problem?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wouldn't say you're getting it wrong, but with family engagement, this is a traditionally it's challenging to really measure it. When we think about that quantitative data, a lot with family engagement, we know what the research says. We know, when families are engaged in their child's education, we know attendance is going to improve because, when you're working and communicating with the school, you're going to make sure your child is there in school and you're asking the questions and seeing how you can support your child at home. We know behavior improves, we know academics improves and all of those things. But I think sometimes when we think about attendance, we tend to think about, okay, what is that plan, or what is the next, strategy we're going to do with attendance versus looking at building that relationship with those families, when it's really looking at the relationships. Do we have those authentic relationships with those families to really talk about what's going on? What are the challenges? What's happening? And, really meeting that family where they are. And so I think when schools continue to strengthen and work to build those authentic relationships with families, we do see it dropped. And once again, like you said, it can't necessarily be treated as a silo. It needs to be embedded into the work that we're doing as it relates to family engagement. So I think once it's done, once we do that, we understand that family engagement is going to be a key point, then I think schools will begin to see that it is a part of that, one of the data predictive strategies we have. But I think it's kind of hard to really gauge and measure truly what's happening with family engagement. It doesn't just happen immediately. It's a process. But I think if schools invest heavily if they start that work prior to it gets to the point where the student is being chronically absent, I think we can start identifying those barriers early on and responding as necessary instead of waiting to after the fact, being reactive, and then beginning to intervene or invest in interventions after the fact. So if we start early with the relationship, staying in contact with families, home visits, phone calls, I think that definitely will make a difference and help improve and reduce chronic absenteeism with our students.
No, I agree with you. I think having a number attached to it, which is much more trackable, will make a lot of difference. People will start to associate that task with a dollar value, and the moment you do that, the priorities will get more aligned. So I do feel that there is a much more important way or simple way to track it. Also, when you were talking about the diversity, which was fascinating to me, tell me about some example, share some examples of families or communities which was hardest to reach, and how did you finally, got the breakthrough and got them engaged? Tell us more about that. It will definitely help a lot of people who will consume this content.
Yeah, so I could just speak more recently with some of the political challenges, or I'll say community challenge we've experienced, especially with our Hispanic families. As I said before, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools serves several families who speak many languages, many who face immigration concerns. And so, recently, many of those our families were hesitant to engage in the school. Many of them were hesitant to even send their children to school. And so what we realized is that we didn't need to bring in a new program. We needed to shift into how we were showing up. As I mentioned earlier, as we began our conversation, we partner with a couple of local organizations that our families trust. And I'm talking about our ML community, that they quite often frequent. These are organizations that they truly trust, and I can think of two of them. And what we did was work closely with those organizations in the community who spoke the language, who had staff who could connect with our families, who were from the same backgrounds as our families. And what we did was we actually went to the neighborhoods. We went to the actual communities, a couple of different community spaces, apartment complexes, and we just spent time in the community where we brought resources, we brought food bags, we connected with families to let them know that we see you, we hear you, we value you. We want to let you know that we care about you. And so, we can't just necessarily ask our families to navigate our systems alone. We want to make sure that we let them know that we care about them. We're here for them. We're here to help them navigate in and out of our district and throughout the community. We respect their voices. We respect what they bring to the table. And our families truly appreciate that. And we received so many positive phone calls, so many positive, just positive feedback about that. And that really is one of our mechanisms to strengthen our trust in the community. We just didn't present, information. Families, you do this, you need to come here. We went to them, we talked to them, we heard them, and then that, pretty much drives what we're doing. And we're doing more of that, meeting them where they are in the community instead of asking them to come to us. And I think that has been great because building that trust and seeing that we care. We've had some amazing even engagements when we did host things in the community. We're having 500 plus families come out to support. So it's some work. We still have work to do. We're not there yet, but I think we're trending in the right direction.
Perfect. No, that's definitely amazing to hear. I think approaching the association can also have a dual benefit, both branding and marketing for the organization, and also, of course, improve family trust in the culture, in the system. Also, when I was reading about your framework, it calls out that educators sometimes they themselves can have deficit mindset, and they can assume that some families are not worth the effort. So how do you break that bias? How do you help get them over this mindset?
Yeah, that takes time. And most of our work is rooted in the research of Dr. Karen Mapp from Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we think about that dual capacity framework. Oftentimes, many of our educators have never had experience with family engagement. Our families come with challenges, like we mentioned before, where there's some trust issues, they're not sure what to expect and so forth. But when we think about some of the deficit mindsets, I think it also comes with our staff not feeling supported. We know that it's super busy all the time. We have that conversation. Some of them may be feeling overwhelmed, but we need to work with them to understand that it's not that families don't necessarily, it's not that staff doesn't necessarily care. They just may not have the tools or know the strategies to really kind of support this work moving forward. And so really working with our staff to understand the benefits of family engagement and how everybody's going to win, how it's going to be beneficial for not only our schools and staff, but how it's going to be beneficial, for our families, our community, and so forth. And so what we're doing is really working with staff to just kind of think through a couple of things and move away from assuming families don't care to replacing it to, what's preventing families from coming to the schools? Why are families not showing up? So it's not necessarily that families don't care, and really shifting their mindset back to just because some of our families can't come during the school day doesn't mean they're not setting up a space for their kid to do homework, or they're not sending their kid prepared with the resources to learn. They may be working. I'm a working parent. I can't necessarily come to events at the school during the workday. So just kind of working with staff to understand that and really think through, what can we do to partner with our families to really understand who they are and understand our families come from different, backgrounds, have different cultures. Their stance on education is different. So it's always important to know the clientele we're serving so that we can best meet them where they are. And so when I think the staff begin to realize that and they begin to fully connect with our families, then you can have a more positive family homeschool partnership with our families. And that's where that mindset work can begin to change.
No, I agree with you. I think calling it out is also important. Sometimes we don't realize that we carry some biases without thinking about it, unless somebody call it out and then realize, oh my God, I didn't realize that. So I think having those moments of breakthroughs are important, and that's only happen when you address it upfront. So yeah, love your approach. But also now I really want to give anybody who's listening to this podcast some actionable item that they can do, not a program or maybe a program, not a budget item, but some decisions or some things that they can do that would change family engagement for their school, rather quickly. So can you share some of the strategies that people can try immediately?
I think the first thing is stop trying to think about how to get families to come to the school and start asking the question, how do we meet our families where they are? I think it's important to kind of maybe create some focus groups, talk to the families directly to see exactly what they need, what are their hopes and dreams for their children, how do they see the school, supporting the efforts for that child, keeping everything student centered. And so I think that is the starting point, and I think that's the number one thing that will help impact how schools are communicating, how schools are scheduling things, for families listening and responding. I think they need to figure out, how do we meet families from where they are, rather than, like you said, creating a new program. I think that will transform engagement and begin to invite that partnership with our families.
No, makes absolute sense. Yeah, those cover up most of my questions, which I think should be helpful for anybody to understand about this particular topic. Now, any podcast can't be complete without talking about AI. So I would love to know how you guys are leveraging AI for better family engagement, and how AI is also obstructing in case it is family engagement.
So absolutely, our district is going through a whole process. Our technology team is intentionally working to ensure that whatever we're using is, I don't know how to explain it. We're able to understand the tools that are out there, how to use it ethically, how to use it to enhance what we're doing, understanding it's not replacing anything, and really working with our families and sharing with them how we are rolling this out throughout the phases in our district. In our work, we have an initiative called Family Academy. Throughout our Family Academy, we've held several sessions for our families to understand how the district is moving towards AI. There are mixed feelings about AI, but we understand this is where the world is going. So we want to ensure that we are getting ahead of this. And so really, when families are using this, or students are using this, just really thinking through what are the best approaches to use it to enhance, or, to help with efficiency and some of the things that we're doing, not to eliminate that critical thinking around the work. And we still want to make sure that we're using it to build those critical thinkers around our students. And so right now in this phase, we're just aligning the work to our pillars of engagement. And we're just kind of slowly rolling it out and just getting feedback from families in the community on their thoughts on how to best kind of move this forward with AI.
No, I love your answer, specifically because, okay, I tell you, I hear this answer a lot, that we have got Gemini, or we got Copilot, we got Magic School, and we are training a staff on it. And I find that to be very narrow thought process, because, as you said, it's about building the capacity and the understanding. And rather than just sticking to one product, you try a bunch of products and you explore. So I think I love the fact that you didn't say that we have just got one product and we are done. It's not going to be that. It's a constantly evolving space. So, and your clarity of emphasizing on critical thinking, that is so important, because these are the human skills that will keep us relevant in this equation of both economies inside school and outside school. So yeah, I love your approach, and I'm pretty sure CMS is in the right hands in your reign. And I wish you all the best for your upcoming challenges and exciting fun.
Thank you for having me today.